Hey guys, how are you doing today? It's P.E. Gilbert, your blogger, writing consultant, and the author to the fantasy novella, The Sultan's Daughter. And today we are honoured to have an interview with the USA Today Bestselling fantasy author, J.C. Kang, who has written the Dragon Songs Saga and Scions of the Black Lotus series, as well as many other short stories. JC is imaginative, knowledgeable, and a jack of all trades when it comes to fantasy and so much else. Here is the interview. Enjoy. So, tell us a bit about yourself. What was the spark that made you write your first book?
Well, when I was in middle school, I read the Dragonlance Chronicles. And this was like 1987 and 88. And afterwards, I really wanted to write a book. 20 years later, I still hadn't written a book. I had gone on with my life and done all kinds of different things. But then I was cleaning my mom's house out, and I came across an old Dungeons and Dragons campaign that I created. And I looked at it and I was like, well, first, a 14-year-old doesn't necessarily have like a great understanding of how the world works. And so I was looking at this world and just laughing at my younger self and saying, okay, this is totally wrong. This couldn't work this way. Rivers don't flow uphill. So I went and recreated the world, and for the fun of it. And when I was done, I was like, I'm probably not going to play Dungeons and Dragons again. Why don't I write a story? Some of the core ideas of the world I kind of liked. It was just sort of like the nitty gritty, like supply and demand and gravity. Those things needed to be tweaked a little bit to fit. And so here I live in Virginia, and we had 3 straight weekends of 14 plus inches of snow, which here that shuts everything, like actually half an inch of snow shuts things down here. So 14 inches, I was pretty much, 3 weeks doing not much of anything because I have my own business. And so I sat down and wrote out an entire book set in this world. And that's what I did. Basically an old Dungeons and Dragons campaign in a major snowstorm.
Sounds like the snowstorm had a very positive effect on you.
It did. I was about to say something probably inappropriate, so I won't.
Probably for the best.
So.
What made you decide to write in the fantasy genre?
Well, fantasy was always that's sort of the first stories I really remember. My older brother read to me when I couldn't read myself, and it was like The Hobbit and the Chronicles of Narnia. So fantasy was always my staple. I think probably Lord of the Rings was the first thing I ever read on my own, followed by Elric, and then later the Dragonlance. Dragonlance was really formative for me. And so when I started to write, there really wasn't any question that I would be writing fantasy.
You have sold over 75,000 copies of your book. That's an amazing and impressive number. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. And I should clarify, that's not just one book. I guess I have 6 novels and 6 novellas. So when I say 75,000, that's like a mix of them all. So it's not just, it's not like one book selling 75,000. So.
Even so, I'd be very happy if I had however many books you've published now. What was it, 5, 6 novellas and multiple short stories, and sold 75,000 copies? I'd be very happy with that.
I guess I have for example, I'm friends with Will White, who is currently sitting at lot. in the entire Amazon Kindle store with a pre-order. And I'm pretty sure he sold 10,000 copies yesterday. So yeah, I have a lot of friends who sell a whole lot more than I do. So
you're in good company. But why do you think readers have enjoyed your books so much?
Well, I think when I first started writing, I had this idea that I wanted to introduce an Asian setting. There just wasn't a lot available that I knew of at the time. So I think for a lot of readers, it was something new. Based upon the reviews I get, what I hear is some people say they connect to the main character, that they understand the travails of coming of age and dealing with expectations from family. Other people have said they feel very immersed in the setting when they're there. So I guess probably all that contributes to it.
Cool. You've hinted just now that your books have an Asian slant to them. What 3 things inspired you to go down this route?
Well, once again, when I was growing up, we read The Hobbit, The Chronicles of Narnia. they were all like sort of a European-based fantasy. And when I was in college, I started watching Hong Kong movies, like martial arts movies, like Wong Fei Hong and Once Upon a Time in China. And so those sort of things sort of got me interested into wuxia, which is that sort of genre you see people flying through bamboo forests and fighting with swords. So that was probably part of it. I wanted to bring that into an epic fantasy setting. I also watched a lot of Japanese. I lived in Japan and watched a lot of Japanese taiga drama, which is kind of their samurai stories. And so they're very much like Game of Thrones-esque, where you have like, they tend to be a little more, the heroes are more heroic than the Game of Thrones type of folks, but they basically have like these really large scale battles. They have like all this politicking and backstabbing. And so that was a really big influence for that. You said 3, that's 2. So I did mention martial arts movies. Actually, I guess the 2 would be the main thing.
It's fine.
I can't come up with a third.
You don't have to. And second, those are really good inspiration. Those are great inspirations, and you've intrigued me.
Thank you.
What 2 things would you like readers to take away from your books?
Well, I'd like them to number one, if they are not Asian, to sort of appreciate that Asian characters can have fun too in a fantasy setting. That's one. And also, I'd like them to think I'm a genius because I have these really, what I like to do, well, not really genius, but my stories tend to have layers upon layers upon layers of plot. So at the end of book 1, the villain is revealed and you're like, oh, that's the villain. But by the end of book 2, you realize that everything you thought in book 1 was not exactly right. And eventually I'm going to have this pretty big reveal, which some of my readers have figured out.
I want to say one thing though, and that is you've been very smart about how you've approached the fantasy genre, because I don't know too many authors who have specialized in, should we say, Asian style fantasy, and you've given yourself a name.
So on the one hand, I would say, yes, if I am known, it is because of Asian fantasy. And in some ways, that's kind of pigeonholed me. I actually started writing a story that had no Asians involved, and everyone was like, well, Asian is your brand. So in some ways, I kind of feel pigeonholed. I would also like to say there are a lot of amazing Asian fantasies out there. Like just here behind me, I have a Fonda Lee's Jade City. I have Ken Liu's Grace of Kings. I have K.S. Veloso's The Wolf of Oren-Yaro. And these are all trad published books. I think I have The Poppy War back there and The Descendant of the Crane. So just in the last 3 or 4 years, there's been an explosion of Asian themed fantasy. And so there is a lot more available now than when I first started writing.
You've hinted at this, but would you ever consider writing in another genre other than fantasy?
So currently I am writing a cyberpunk mix with fantasy. So it's not pure, it's not non-fantasy because it does have a fantasy element in it, but it does have a cyberpunk aspect to it. I've also written a rom-com, but I haven't actually, okay, so I started a rom-com and haven't quite finished it yet. So I set it aside a while ago, and maybe one of these days I'll get back around to it. So yeah, I could see myself writing something else eventually.
Ooh, that's really cool. Look forward to it.
That's what one of my friends said, but I think once she actually reads it, she might decide otherwise. So.
Well, we have to read it before we can make such a decision. The fact that you've even got us reading it is testament to your skills as an author.
Well, thank you.
You are also a Chinese medicine doctor, a martial arts instructor, and a technical writer by profession. You are extremely talented. In what ways have your jobs helped you as a writer in fantasy?
So I guess going back to your earlier question, what the third influence I couldn't think of, it would probably be my profession. So acupuncture, just in terms of, that's my day job. And just sort of the understanding of the body from a Chinese medicine perspective has found its way into my stories. Martial arts, definitely, just because, in fantasy, we tend to write a lot of fight scenes. And so just choreography, I don't tend to go super technical because when I first started, I wrote very technical fights and my critique partners were bored out of their mind. So I tend to condense things and make things more easy to follow. But one thing I do find is that I keep the spacing pretty good. Sometimes I'll read something where a character does one thing, then another thing, but they couldn't have possibly done that because of where they were spaced. So I think martial arts has helped with that. As for technical writing, that's something I haven't done in 20 some years. And if anything, it was probably more of a detriment to fantasy writing than anything, or fiction writing in general. I mean, fiction writing is completely different, as a completely different monster altogether. So at least I had a decent sense of grammar. I guess, you're from the UK. My editor was from London, and so I was actually writing in British English for a while there with OUs instead of O's and all the other weird things you Brits do. But anyway, I had good grammar, let's say. But beyond that, technical writing wasn't a big help. More than anything, it was a detriment, because just the way technical writing is structured compared to fiction writing.
I do understand that, and I do empathize with that. But it's great that your other professions have helped you a lot with your writing.
Yeah, I think that once again, just they find their way into my works pretty much.
If you could go back in time and speak with your younger self, what advice would you give him about the writing process?
See, I've never really thought about that. I've thought about all the things I tell myself about other things besides the writing process. But for the writing itself, I would probably say to read more. I think that when I was younger, I did read plenty of fantasy, but I really wish I had taken time to read more other types of literature as well. And that probably would have kept me off the streets and having injuries that are now coming back to bite me now, which is what I would really tell my younger self. It's just don't do stupid stuff like skateboard.
What is your writing kryptonite?
The internet. So one of the things about my particular job is that as an acupuncturist is I probably work 25 to 30 hours a week. And that leaves me a lot of time to write. But do I write? If something is going on in the world, I am doing research on it. And the internet has been like my bane. There's such a huge time waster. So yes, internet is my writing kryptonite. I mean, of course it helps, because when you want to research like certain things like an exit wound from a sword, then yeah, it's pretty helpful. You can find these things on the internet, but it's a huge distraction for me.
How has writing fantasy books changed you as a person?
So I was thinking about this question, and I couldn't really come up with an answer. And I have a lot of friends, like I was saying, I have friends who will write 5,000, 10,000 words a day. They'll put out like 6 to 8 books a year. And I'm not that kind of person. So, for them, I think fantasy writing has changed their lives dramatically in terms of they were able to give up day jobs and, focus on writing and, make a living out of it. For me, I love my day job and the internet is there always getting in the way of my writing. So I don't know that it's really changed me a whole lot. If anything, it sort of helped me, I guess, make better use of the time I do have, like how I spend it with that family and stuff. A greater appreciation of it.
Sounds like it has done something good for you.
Perhaps.
Again, you've hinted at the answer to this, but are you currently writing another book at the moment? And if so, what is it about?
So I'm actually writing 4 different books, but right now I'm focusing on one, and it is the cyberpunk Scions. Scions is like kind of a progression fantasy, just sort of based in Taoist Chinese concepts, and it's really popular in web novels. So it's people who are trying to obtain like supernatural skills and immortality through what they call cultivation, which is sort of the like meditation and martial arts practice. And so mine is a mix of cyberpunk. So I have a character who has come. So the idea is that there's a parallel Earth, and one of them is the land where people practice this mystical martial arts. And the gates between them have been sealed off for, I guess, 600 years. Actually, it takes place in 2800 AD, so it's closer to like 1500 years. And so the main character is trying to close off the gap between them. In the meantime, he meets some people in our world, or I should say in our future, who come to help him. And so there's a cyberpunk aspect, dystopian kind of government, of like an interactive internet type of thing.
Outside of writing, what do you like to do in your spare time?
So gardening is probably one of the things I've been doing a lot of lately. Actually, I used to garden a lot, but then I was going to take a year off last year just to let the weeds had taken over the garden beds, and so I was going to cover the garden beds and let the heat kill all the seeds. But then the pandemic happened. We're stuck at home, and I've actually ended up expanding my garden beds. So gardening is probably the big thing I do on the side.
That can give you time to ruminate on ideas for your stories.
It does, but I'm also usually listening to an audiobook at the same time. So that's how I get most of my reading done, is actually not really reading, but listening. So that's good audiobook story time.
It's a good way of doing two things at once. Brilliant. Lastly, and I cannot believe we're on the last question already, is there anything else you would like to say that you haven't as yet in this interview?
I would say that part of being, especially as a self-published author, is having to learn marketing. And I released in 2016. That was my first book, and it had the wrong cover, the wrong title, and totally bombed. And so it's always been a learning process. So that first series I later rebranded with new covers. And that's where everything started to really sell. That's where we started hitting like the tens of thousands of copies. And right now here's like the sort of the flagrant self-promotion. I just re-released that first book from 2016, and this is that, Songs of Insurrection. The sequel comes out this Friday on ebook, which is Orchestra of Treacheries. I already showed you book 3. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now, besides writing that story.
And that's all I have for you today, guys. Thank you for watching, and I really hope you have enjoyed this interview with the USA Today best-selling fantasy author, J.C. Kang. Like, comment, and hit that subscribe button, and tell me, what did you think of the interview? Do you agree that JC is imaginative, knowledgeable, and a jack of all trades? In the description below, I have left links to JC's books and to his social media accounts. If you enjoy reading fantasy novels with complex plots and sprawling world building, then you are going to love JC's books. Check them out now. Moreover, my debut fantasy novella, The Sultan's Daughter, is out. If you are looking for a book that is short, fast-paced and full of suspense, then check it out. I have left a link for the book in the description below as well. Otherwise, until next time, keep well. Once again, guys, I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching my video. I really appreciate it, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button, and then you will be the first to receive more awesome content from my channel, and I hope to see you again soon.